Welcome to Our Whole Lives Taking Flight. My name is Reverend Amy Johnson, and I serve as the Minister for Sexuality, Education, and Justice in the United Church of Christ. I'm joined this morning by my owl sister, Melanie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Melanie Davis. I am the UUA's Our Whole Lives Program Manager, and it is a pleasure to be with you today. We have a lovely panel of guests with us today. We will introduce them by name and then they will introduce themselves with a little more detail later. From the UUA side of things, we have Jermaine Cripe, who is a religious educator. Oh, actually, everybody here is an owl trainer. Reverend Samaya Oakley, Amy.
Yes, and you also have Tuli Patel,
Oh, Tuli Patel. I'm
and,
sorry, didn't see a
uh,
picture of them.
and then on the UCC side, we have Reverend T. Michael Rock and Reverend Kim Kendrick. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are here on January 7th. And I just want to lift up that we are all living in a time of great upheaval and violence and offer prayers for all the places in the world and in our nation and even in our own communities where that is happening. Prayers for peace and also deep gratitude for all of you showing up today because this topic seems particularly important given the times that we are living in. So with that, let's just go round robin and have you all introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with who I can see on my screen, though I know all of you will only see who's speaking. Jermaine, will you introduce yourself and then pass it on to someone else?
Sure, Amy. My name is Jermaine Cripe. I am the Lifespan Coordinator at Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Summit, New Jersey. I'm an owl trainer of trainers and facilitator in our congregation, and I am proud that our congregation is able to offer many levels of owl training and a safe space for our LGBTQ community. I will pass this on to T. Michael.
Thank you, Jermaine. I'm T. Michael Rock. Currently, I guess I'm the Director of Spiritual Direction and Contextual Ed here at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. And I get to play as one of the pastors at Lindale United Church of Christ. Just our whole lives have been a big part of my life for 25 years. And or more because I was part of the pilot project back when we were first putting the curriculum out in the mid 90s. And it's just been a deep, integral part of my ministry and just grateful for all the people I've met along the way. Reverend Kim, you're up.
Thank you so much, T. Michael. Good morning and hello, everyone. I am Reverend Kim Kendrick. I currently co-pastor at Community Congregational Church in Benicia, California. I am a facilitator and trainer of trainers for Our Whole Lives. I absolutely love and enjoy all of the programs that we offer and that we bring to the community through its lived experience, as well as an ability to help strengthen communities through faith, as well as parents. And this is a wonderful opportunity to do that even further. I'd like to pass it on to Samaya.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm Samaya Oakley. I'm currently serving Calgary Unitarians and did here in Canada, in the province of Alberta. And to give you some contextual ideas about the province of Alberta, I often describe it as Canada's Texas because of oil and all of that, and politics and all of that kind of stuff. I've been involved in with Our Whole Lives since the mid 90s. I'm a trainer and a facilitator at all the levels, trainer elementary and youth. And I have seen how it changes people's lives. I have witnessed the transformation that happens. It's absolutely phenomenal. And here in Calgary, I'm working to start offering the program because I think it's very important for us as congregations to be able to offer this as a vital part of our faith. So thank you. Melanie or Amy, who goes next?
Well, we
Yeah,
we
I think,
lost Tuli for a minute. I'm texting Tuli to see what happened. There might be some tech issue there, but
okay. Well, let's keep
Tuli.
going then, and we will continue. We have some questions we were going to ask each of you, and the first one is, how did you get involved? Thinking back, how did you get involved in our whole lives and sexuality and our faith? So thinking back, um, who will go and just let us know a little bit about that history. What it was it that drew you to it?
I'll jump in. This is T. Michael. He, they. Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, so back a long time ago, when I was in New England, when deeply connected to UCC Worlds, in that setting, we heard that there was a curriculum being established. I was already trained in creating God's image, which was an adult curriculum that the UCC had published in the 80s. We had certainly heard about your sexuality, and when my conference person at the in Massachusetts conference UCC said they needed a pilot to do our whole lives, they asked if I would do that in my local setting. So we piloted the middle school curriculum in the 90s at um, Waltham UU church, and it was just a blast. And then got trained at all the levels and trained for many years. So that was my early days, and it was very formative. And in the midst of that was being thrust into it because I served at church as an after pastor, my very first church in seminary. There was a deep wound in that community for child sexual abuse, and they hadn't dealt with it, and so that was my calling, and so I got all the training I could get in the midst of that. So I spent a lot of time getting trained, and then passed that along to our whole lives in the development. So that was meeting the wound of the congregation and the trauma informed ministry that our whole lives really excels at. So I'm complete.
Well, I can go. I came to Unitarian Universalism in general, as many people do, as a parent who was like, I have no idea what I'm about to do faith wise, but I know I don't want to teach my child what I was taught when I was a child. And so coming into the congregation I'm a part of, and joining the religious education program, having immediately them discuss sexuality in a way that normalized it versus stigmatizing it. And that to me was an eye opener and almost like a huge beacon saying, this is where you belong. This is where you're supposed to bring your children. This is where you're supposed to encourage every child and every adult to come in so we could deal with that misinformation and the fear and the pain, the trauma of how sensuality and sexuality has been taught and expressed in our communities against our bodies. Um, Also, I just loved the fact that there was no bad question to be asked. The children's curiosity was never shut down as we don't talk about that here. That's not a church talk. It was always, yes, that's a great question. I don't have the answer for you right now, but I'll get it and I'll get back to you. And to me, that just was a huge sigh of relief because I was that questioning kid when I grew up and I was always shut down. And it just made me super happy to know that as a core part of the teaching of being a facilitator is to make space for wonder, to make space for the silly, to make space for the awkward, to make space for all the things that you feel in sexuality and discussing bodies and things around our health. And isn't that what faith is supposed to be? We're supposed to work out our lumps here. We're supposed to navigate the tough times together and doing it in a way that affirms our wholeness, not our brokenness, is what drew me here.
I love that. I love that you said you wanted your children to learn in a way that was different from the way that you learned. And for folks who are new to Our Whole Lives, perhaps chiming in for the first time, that parent, the opportunity for parents to explore how they learned about sexuality and then how they want their children is part of the parent orientation, parent and guardian orientation. That is a required part of OWL programs, that we really want to empower parents to think about the messages that their children will be receiving and become familiar with the curriculum as well as the faith integration parts of it. Thank you for lifting that up, Jermaine.
I think that is Amy, and I think that is one of the most common things that we hear from folks is that they really want to do this differently than how they were taught. And I know that that my story, I know there's others of you that may want to chime in, but I was just thinking that my story is I was a youth director at my local church, a small local church in a suburb of Seattle, and heard about it, about 20 years ago, and took the training. And I talk about this Venn diagram of like children and youth and families, which has always sort of been my jam, and and something that was really relevant to them, topics that are so relevant to them, not only sexual behavior, but our whole lives is so much more than that, right? And as you were talking, Janine, like creating this safe space, and T. Michael, like providing information so that it can be a healthier community. And then the faith piece, that was like the sweet spot in the middle of all of that, that this was not just a program where we were a faith community that was willing to offer sexuality education, but that this was part of our faith and that it was supported by our faith and was theologically grounded in our faith. That is something that still lights up my soul.
I came to OWL through pastoral ministry and a deep awareness that young people and adults already have questions about their bodies, about relationships, about identities. And it was, I think, us all sharing this morning, today, reminds me that it's been 15 years for me, that in seminary, I realized that folks still didn't have spaces that they felt comfortable, that were safe, that were faith rooted, so that they can talk and bring their questions. And I'm reminded, and to piggyback off of Jermaine, that even as a child and an adult, I still have questions. And where do I go? Because the faith of my childhood absolutely did an injustice in telling me to just pray about it, or to pray away the gay, is what I heard as a young person. And so OWL to me felt like a gift. And it is still a gift, because it didn't ask people to choose between their faith and their sexuality. It didn't ask people to choose between their faith and the truth. It continues to honor curiosity and dignity while standing its ground in values also, for both clergy as well as parents, and to give people language that was honest and not shaming. And so that's where I appreciate it, and developmentally appropriate, so that my 9-year-olds understand the message, and that my 15-year-old can also understand the values that OWL presents as well.
Samaya, I saw a look of recognition, and what were you thinking?
Um, well, the developmentally appropriate piece of it, I got involved in OWL back in the 90s. I was lucky enough to join a congregation that had done About Your Sexuality and had shifted over into Our Whole Lives. John Seeley and Joy Theory were the first ones I ever took, and I participated in the adult um, pilot program the very first time that that it was piloted. And just how much my eyes opened as a result of taking that program. When I started working with the youth and, hearing that they needed 7 and 9 facilitators, I was like, yes, sign me up, because it was developmentally appropriate. And I just want to share one experience I had. I worked with a group of youth. We did the 7 through 9. They had done the 10 through 12. I was their facilitator, and then the young adult pilot program came up, and we applied, and we offered it, and it was this crop that came in, and I was going, oh my goodness, have I ever made a mistake? Like this is the wrong group of people because they've had all of this prior experience. It was so right on for where they were and what they were experiencing in their life that it was just phenomenal. It was really, that's what really, that was one of the experiences that just went, yeah, this is such an important program. We need to make sure that we're doing it. And because it integrates accurate information, it integrates ethical reflection and spiritual grounding. It doesn't tell people what to think, it teaches people how to think. And that is a lifelong lesson that applies to many aspects of life. And that's just one of the glimmers that our whole lives offers. As you can tell, I'm quite passionate about it.
Well, I think we all are. When I got involved, I had been a volunteer at Planned Parenthood. I was a patient educator and was floored by the lack of information that people came in. Not just teenagers. We had patients who were all the way into menopause, and the amount of education that I had to do there was incredible. So that when my congregation said, "Hey, there's this new curriculum. Would you be interested?" I'm like, "Oh, heck yes, I am." Because I knew the need was so great. I also recognize as a parent that my children had different levels of curiosity. One asked lots of questions, the other two never wanted to ask a question. So it was really important for them to have a place where they could get accurate information in among people that they knew, kids that they knew, adults that they trusted, with values that I respected. Yes, they did get sex ed in school, but that was a whole different kind of jokey thing, and a lot of information was not shared. So that having access to the OWL program for my kids was a real relief because yes, we continued to have conversations with our kids and they got the opportunity to get questions answered and have conversations that they would not have at home.
I want to just lift up a couple things. One is to tag on what Kim said about giving people the language, because I think that along with having a lot of people who say, you know, I want this to be different from how it was for me. A lot of people have that intention, but don't know how. They don't know what to say, don't know how. And that idea that there is language about what's developmentally appropriate to deal with at ages from, I know there's a question in Q&A, are there lifespans? So just for those of you that maybe don't know, we have in our whole lives programs for kindergarten and first grade, 4th through 6th graders, 7th through 9th graders, 10th through 12th graders, adults, young adults, adults and older adults. And I remember after we started offering our whole lives and I was facilitating it for teenagers, my partner and I took an Our Whole Lives for Adults class at the local UU church. And I was like, oh, here's the same thread. Here's this actually even the same exercise, but now we're doing it as adults, and this is how you do it as adults versus this is how we do it with teenagers. And it was just really lovely to see in real time that thread that goes through the curriculum around there's so many foundational pieces and that are just taught throughout, but that hit those developmental levels, like you said, Samaya, so that somebody can take the whole program all the way through and it's not repetitive. But you can also start anywhere because each one of them is very complete as it is. Um, and I think also the other thing I just wanted to say is the idea of think about it that you were talking about, Samaya, those critical thinking skills. I remember hearing years ago somebody saying, you know, um, so there's in our culture, and this is still true, I think, there's a faction of people who are saying, don't talk about it, don't even think about it. The sexual risk avoidance folks are like, we need to teach teenagers not to even think about sex. I mean, good luck. And that only, I think, is a, a avenue for shame and stigma. And we know that shame and stigma can be fatal. So I'm definitely against that. And then there's another faction that's just like, do whatever you want, it's all good. And where our whole lives and sexuality and our faith sit is think about it, be intentional. What do you want? What are your values? What's important to you? What are some things that you need to think about in terms of other people in a relationship? And how do you listen? And how do you be a good relationship partner? So I think that's, again, Samaya, like you, I'm very passionate and we could all talk for a long time. Um,
I just wanted to lift up, since we have some people who aren't familiar with OWL, to share that so Our Whole Lives is a secular curriculum, so it can be used in schools and community programs and whatnot. It's a comprehensive sex ed curriculum. And then there's also material that is faith-based. So there's UCC material and there's UU material. We're now working with the United Methodists to help them integrate this into their programming as well. So we don't use the faith material in schools unless they're, Christian schools, they could use it. But yes, that faith material can be combined. And the formats that we're moving toward, currently we have the kindergarten through first grade and the grades 10 through 12 editions in this new format. There's a secular book, an LUU edition, and an LUCC edition. And rather than having separate books with the secular and the faith material, in this new format, the faith content is seamlessly interwoven into the secular material. So it's really easier for people in our faith communities to add discussion questions, add ritual, add scripture, add values-based information for our own faiths with less work, and it's just an easier process to integrate that.
Melanie, I think I'm going to go ahead and skip to the third question because people have kind of answered the second one that we had on our list about how owl and sexuality and our faith relate to our faith. But the next question we have on our agenda today is, as an Our Whole Lives trainer, what have you observed as people explore sexuality education and its relationship to faith and ministry? So what have you observed in those training spaces as people explore that?
I'll chime in if I may. Um, One of the things that I've seen again and again um, is a what what I visualize as a relief, like oh, wow, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who has a child that's been asking that. I'm not the only one that's been fumbling or saying to my people in ministry or to my kids, I'll be right back. And then they go to the phone and they're Googling or onto the laptop. And so people are having a sigh of relief, knowing that they're not alone in their questioning, in their IDK. I don't know. People also come in carrying sometimes their own sets of ideals and beliefs. Sometimes they're carrying shame or silence or fear. And when they realize that they can talk about sexuality without being judged, without being fixed, something opens up for them. And so they're also able to insert their faith safely, and it doesn't weaken in that process. It gets more honest, the conversations, the clarity, um, and the room also gets more honest and compassionate. And so many people also, again, as I observe, have that relief and they can reclaim the things that they know, the things that they are learning. And often it comes out to be with a lot more integrity and a lot more understanding. And again, compassion.
Thank you, Kim.
Oh, go ahead, Michael, and Michael, and then I'll go next.
I was going to say the same thing, Samantha. Uh, yeah, I think that in the training room when we're training facilitators, um, it is powerful because not all the facilitators come kind of completely vetted by their congregations or communities to be trainers of our whole lives. And many of them come with their own woundedness and their own particular brand of life experience, right? It's everything is contextual. And I've sensed in those rooms just a deep pastoral presence, a caring presence, a compassionate presence, an open, sex positive presence, certainly an open human dignity presence. And that's been the comments over many, many years has always been, this was what I needed, or this was the healing space that I longed for. And I saw a lot of you participants love the fact that there was a Christian denomination doing the work. And I saw a lot of UCC folks say we love partnering with Unitarian Universalists because our faith is expansive in the same way. And that kind of building of the relationships and ongoing kind of service to the community was sometimes even more powerful than whether or not any of the people in our trainings went on to teach our whole lives, because sometimes they didn't. But something happened in the midst of those rooms that was just a powerful experience and helped the movement grow. So I just want to lift that up. That it was the classroom is great, but the training part was just a big piece of this ministry.
Yeah, I agree with Kim in the sense of the relief that people feel like, oh, here is a place where we can actually talk about the things that we don't talk about. I also agree with the healing aspect of it. I've witnessed many people in the course of trainings like, oh, I need to talk to somebody else about my experiences. Those kinds of places. Where I want to go is the celebration at the end, and how people are excited about being able to offer this in their congregations as we come to I watch like there's this curve that happens in a training. And at the end, it's like, oh, and now we actually get to do this and bring this into the congregations and have that ripple out. And that is such for me as a trainer, watching that celebration and watching people get excited about that, that's what really jams me. That's what I really love.
It's so true, Samaya, that arc, right, from the beginning. I know I did more trainings than usual last year because we were doing our 25th anniversary celebration. And I just saw that again and again and again, the people coming in and just sometimes being really quiet and really tentative and like, okay, I'm here. I've trusted somehow that I should be here. But by the end, just the lightness and the amount of I think it's shame and trepidation that people have shed, right? They've just shed it, and so they're lighter in their demeanor, in their spirit, and they're having fun, and they're appropriately joking, and it's just a beautiful thing to see. And sometimes it doesn't happen until like that third day of training. Like it's still like kind of tense and there's a lot because it's a very deep, meaty training, right? But there's just almost always that turning and that beautiful for me, for my faith, spirit shows up. Spirit shows up.
Yeah. As you all were speaking, I was writing down words. So I was paying attention, even though it looked like I was doing something else. And the three words that jumped out to me as you all were speaking, like Kim, when you spoke, I saw intersections. And Michael and Samaya, when you both spoke, it was like tenderness. And then evangelistic. Unitarian Universalists are very, very tight to our faith in the sense that if you ask us, we'll tell you. But as far as us going out and saying, hey, come to my church, that's not going to happen with the UU typically. However, it happens without. It happens once you've gone through that training. And I've seen where those intersections where people were afraid to say, I relate to that because it's not in line with what they're supposed to do, because we don't tell people who we are. We don't tell people where we are. We definitely don't tell people what to believe. But we don't also want people to continue to live in their lie or live in a false truth. So we have to come to that space where we have to be brave enough to speak up for ourselves, each other, and for life, and do it in a way that's tender. I haven't been to a training where there wasn't an oops. In UU world, we call it oops ouch, or there hasn't been a training where at least multiple times over several days, folks have come to each other or come to the group and said, this is what bubbled up for me when this was said, and I need to name that. And having folks acknowledge their role in that spot, being vulnerable in a way that is not comfortable, is, I think it is that one of the beautiful things that come out of OWL is the fact that we are allowed to make mistakes with each other because we are imperfect people, but we're given the grace to come back into covenant with each other, to come and say, hey, you know, I messed up. Help me see this better so that when I do go out and speak, it goes further. And that kind of vulnerability is needed with our children. We can't go in always being the authority. They don't want that. Actually, it would turn them off. I know the kids in my congregation, if I came in saying I knew everything, they'd be like, enjoy your class because I won't be in it. They want to see you make a mistake and navigate it. And we don't do enough of that. We don't see enough of that in the world. Everyone's perfect. Everyone's right. You're wrong. Versus, yikes, I did make a mistake. Thank you for pointing it out for me. And this is what we're going to work through together and do better. And I think if more of that was done in all aspects of our faith tradition, be it our sexuality education, to our social justice work, to our just spiritual development as people of faith, our congregations would be booming. They would be booming.
So true. And
Take an OWL class. I love it when there are a combination of people in a training room, when we have people who are community folks who may or may not have, bring a spiritual background with them, when there are people representing different faith traditions, and people can learn from each other's faith perspectives and their lack of faith. I think it can take away some of the fear and the assumptions that people have when they hear this is produced by two faith communities. There are a lot of assumptions about what our whole lives might be. But when people are in this room, they're learning from each other. And, as you pointed out, Jermaine, sometimes there are ouch moments. There are assumptions that need to be addressed. And to your point, yeah, there is, that's what we trainers do, right? We try to bring grace into the room and maintain that safe space for learning and experimenting and modeling what can be done then back in the congregations and churches that they return to.
And I think that your point, Jermaine, about how incredibly important that work is, and in our world, right? Like we started out acknowledging the times that we're living in where we're just not seeing our leaders model that. And it's so, so important. And to be able to give not only our youth, but also those of us who choose to dive into the facilitation pieces, or as T. Michael said, people who never even will facilitate a formal Our Whole Lives program, but they've now had that experience and can bring that sense and that spirit of how that is to the spaces that they're in. It really is quite transformational work. And I know I have a friend, another colleague of ours, and we used to meet years and years ago before either one of us had any position in our national faith organizations, and say, world peace through our whole lives. And like, we're not kidding. Like, we're not kidding.
Yeah, I like it when within trainings we talk about we explore how our whole lives is ministry, and that not everyone comes into this. They're recruited by their churches or their congregations, and because maybe somebody thought they might be good at it, or somebody thought, oh, you've got the time to do it, you might as well volunteer. And so you might come into the training as this is just a training so I can teach, but you leave feeling like, oh, I am part of a big ministry. And this is really soul enriching work. And it is soul enhancing opportunities for the people who are in whatever level of OWL they happen to participate in. But that concept of ministry and service and passion and spirit, I think, is so important. And I'm really glad that that's part of OWL trainings.
Yeah. So I just want to take a breath and like take that all in and think about, boy, I'm going to rewatch this webinar when I'm having a day. Samaya, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. And one of the things I think that contributes to that sense of relief that hasn't been mentioned is the values that our whole lives has at the core, and how that helps in a training environment. I have watched people put down some expectations about what they thought they would need to be doing. And when they know that, oh, I just need to agree and uphold these values and to carry these values into what I'm doing in the classroom with the participants, that adds a whole different dimension. And I think it's very intricately tied to both faiths, to any faith. And here in Alberta, where, now you have to opt into sex ed in the schools as opposed to opting out, and they're talking about getting rid of it altogether in the schools. It is so important that we offer this because, as you said, Melanie, it's a sense of ministry. It's a sense of ministering to the whole person. We tell you to bring your whole self here. And that doesn't mean leave your sexuality at the door. That means bring that in. And that is so important. It is a cornerstone of this program. So,
Yeah, thank you, Samaya. And I think also many of us are living in places in the United States where the same is true, that either there is no sex ed anymore, or the type of sex ed that's being offered is not comprehensive, it's not inclusive. There are so many restrictions on what people can and can't say. There's threats to removing people's licensure for healthcare providers or educators, or even sometimes parents who are educating their children about these things. So churches and faith communities and congregations, at this moment anyway, remain a place where we can do this ministry. And that's one of the reasons we are pretty adamant about calling it a ministry, is because that is something that churches and congregations have some, and faith communities still have some protection for, as offering their ministries. Um, Another question we have, speaking of that, and speaking of different types of environments and different beliefs about what is okay and not okay to teach kids and adults. Another a question that we wanted to discuss today is, what advice can you offer people who receive pushback about offering sexuality education in faith settings? Especially for some of folks who may be on our call and new to it, and or might be getting a different kind of pushback than they have been. I will just start out by saying, if you are offering an Our Whole Lives program and you are getting contacted by any type of media, please reach out to me or Melanie. Please do not try to take that on yourself. The United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association have entire news teams that are used to dealing with that, and that is helpful to us and to the Our Whole Lives program if we have a united voice from our faith organizations. It can just be super easy to, unfortunately, get have something go in a way that was not intended, even though you might have really good intentions. So if that happens, please, please, please reach out to us.
Yeah, and that even something, hey, we heard you had a great program. We'd like to talk to you about it. Call us first, because sometimes those are disingenuous invitations, and they're trying to trip you up. So we're really happy to help you, and our staff is paid. You don't pay them. Yeah.
But other than that, if somebody's just coming to you personally, or if somebody is hearing uh, people in their congregation saying, "Why are we offering this?" or "Why would we offer sexuality in our faith communities?" What advice would you offer people who receive that pushback, or they are out in a community talking to friends, or somebody is telling them they think it's a dumb idea or something?
I always throw it back at them. Usually, when I get questions like that, I ask why. Why would we not offer it and allow them to dive into their own reasons, their own misconceptions, their own prejudices and biases, and then fill in afterwards? Because I could give all my list of things and they're all justified and sound fabulous and everything, but I don't know where they're coming from. Is it misinformation? Is it indoctrination? Is it fear? um, where are they coming from? Is where I start. Um, and then I offer, actually, I've had conversations with families. I'm like, if you want to sit and have a cup of coffee with me, I would love to hear your story and share with you why I did what I did, because I didn't get into this work initially um, as a facilitator jumping right in. I came in as a parent. I came in as someone who had sexual trauma and had questions and was raised by a nurse. A very open and liberally sharing information and correct terms nurse. And I still had questions. So it was, I would go with where they are, start with where they are, who they are, and then work backwards from there.
I did a training once with John Saltzman, who was one of the original trainer of trainers back in the day. And I loved what he said is look for the question behind the question. And that's exactly what you were talking about, Jermaine, is like, so tell me more about what it is that, where does this come from? Because often it might, it could be fear, it could be all of those things. And it could also be their own personal trauma that they are scared of addressing. So always like that pastoral presence. I love what you said, Jermaine. Sit down, have a cup of coffee. I'd love to hear your story. Tell me more about where this is coming from. And then you can meet them. And then also find the values again. Bringing it back to the values is super important. Love to hear what others have to say.
I 1000% agree about the creating and nurturing the relationship first. And that the pushback is sometimes about fear, sometimes about an individual's personal things, stuff that they're going to bring or they don't want to bring. And a lot of times it's not about the facts. And so I absolutely, in these instances, I encourage people to lead with the relationship rather than any arguments, to listen deeply, to share with each other also, and to keep centering real people, not abstract debates or ideas, because we don't have to convince. Um, we want to be in relationship with folks and healthy relationships, and to stay rooted in that love and that clarity and in purpose. And faith communities absolutely grow best when trust is there alongside discipleship and education as well.
Did you want to speak, T. Michael?
Yeah, I think that's what we're here to do. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, relationships all the time. And I just want to add the theological component to this whole work is to reunify the body and the spirit. Too many times our religious life has been a separation of who we are. And so living into the somatic world of our precious, beautiful, broken bodies is part of our whole lives mission. And to build on what Jermaine said earlier is it is the most evangelistic thing, I think, for UUs and UCC folks, because people need it. The world needs this message. And, peace through our whole lives, world peace, absolutely. So I think this is a super important thing to just ground this in our faith, in our understanding of what it means to be a whole human being, and really heal some of the real brokenness the church has laid onto people. And we all know that UCC and UU congregations are filled with refugees from other faith traditions who've experienced that separation. So this is a work of healing and justice.
Yeah.
Amy and I did a workshop last year at UUA General Assembly called Owl Sexuality Education as a Community Care Innovation. And the whole thrust of it, and we're going to be exploring it more in Taking Flight later on. The idea is building those relationships so that you're not saying, "Hey, bring your kids here. We're going to talk about sex." It's actually using techniques that are used to do justice work and build relationships for justice work, and repurposing those techniques for relationship building to create relationships that then open the doors to the community for our whole lives. And for anyone who's struggling right now to get a cohort of people large enough for, ideally 10 people at least in an OWL program, then opening your doors to the community can be an answer that allows you to offer OWL to your community, your faith community as well. So absolutely, those relationships are really important.
Yeah, and I wanted to just tag on that a couple things, and I think we're going to get to some of our questions that are in the Q&A as we're finishing up this hour. One thing is about the evangelism, like yes, all over the place. That we were at General Synod, UCC General Synod this summer, and there was an Our Whole Lives resolution, and when it came time for discussion, there were only lines of people waiting. There was nobody at the anti-mic, which was just a moment of beautifulness. Melanie and I were in tears, and then we had to go up on the big stage. But anyway, it was testimony after testimony after testimony about how important this ministry was. And one of the things that I have said to people in my conversations, and yeah, it's relationship and why would we not? Because for me, in using Christian language, it's a sin of omission if we do not offer this type of education for all the reasons that we have spoken about today. There's a question in the chat, and there's a question in the Q&A that I wanted to briefly address. And one of them is related to this conversation that we've just been having right here about offering and why is it important for faith communities. And there are actually a few places where even faith communities have been concerned about some sort of persecution or prosecution for offering our whole lives. And what we can say is that it's really important if you're living somewhere where that is true, where there is such repressive lawmaking that is happening with such precision around certain things, to please protect yourselves, to please reach out to your churches or your conference or your whatever legal representation you have to find out what your vulnerability is. And I know that we have heard from folks who have said, our church reached out and we decided we're going to take on the risk. And there are other people who have said, we've reached out and we've decided we're not going to take on that risk right now. Both are valid. It depends on your community, what support you have around you, and what you're willing to do. So please do care for yourselves.
Yeah, and the UUA and the UCC are not in a position to offer legal advice or legal support to either individuals or to congregations. So that is something that, in addition to your own moral compass and your own risk, talk to your congregation about their willingness to support you, and possibly to your general counsel for your church to see what the rule, to have a legal interpretation of what's going on in your state, because that's really what matters. Amy, there was another question about, yes, this role is recorded. If you registered to attend, you will get a newsletter with a link to the recording for this workshop. And there was a question about whether we support folks with disabilities, specifically autism. Yes, absolutely. We have trainers who are dealing with that themselves, either for themselves or their family members. We have facilitators. We have lots of people in our programs who are on the autism spectrum. And we, for all sorts of disabilities, we try to be as inclusive as possible, finding resources and workarounds for folks who need some help. We don't have like a specific curriculum for people on the spectrum, but the workshops do incorporate thinking, and we have had as we develop our resources, we have accountability readers who hold varied identities, and they read for how will this be interpreted or how can this be more inclusive. And if anybody has any specific concerns about how can we handle this or how can I be more comfortable with that, you're absolutely welcome to reach out to Amy or to me. It's either owl at ucc.org or owl at uua.org, and we will work with you.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted to, there's a question also about online programs. We do have online trainings, but the curriculum were not written for online use. So we don't recommend that you offer an Our Whole Lives program to participants online. It's just we know more about online learning now, and that's just not how it was developed. And also, I just want to, somebody said we're trying to get a high school group going. It didn't fill this winter. You know, you are not alone. There are a lot of folks who are having to try more than once or try creative things to get enough youth together for a program. Sometimes people will reach out to other churches to do something together, particularly the new high school curriculum is 12 sessions and possible to do in retreat formats with a few sessions over a few weekends. So think about those kind of things, I think, rather than online. It's so important for youth to be together in person and to have conversations face to face. And also, when people are online in a situation even like this, like and even if you're in a Zoom meeting, you don't know who is outside this little box that you can see, and we don't that automatically creates a an uncertainty about privacy, about conversations and safety and those kind of things. So those are some of the reasons that we don't offer the programs for youth online right now.
I think also so we are field testing right now a shorter version of the 7 to 9 curriculum. It's 16 2-hour workshops as opposed to 26 90-minute workshops. We'll see how we haven't seen the field test feedback yet, but we're testing that because of the trouble that we were hearing from people scheduling things. I will say that I hear frequently, and I'm sure Amy does too, it's that we can't get the kids to come, that their schedules are, all over the map. There's sports and there's custody issues and whatnot. And we certainly empathize with that. We're both parents. We've had to deal with that ourselves. But that's where I think helping the parents understand the value of Our Whole Lives is really important. We have a recorded Taking Flight webinar about running successful parent orientations, so people might be interested in watching that. Also, we offer parents and caregivers as sexuality educators, and that can be a good program to start with. That can be offered online or in person. It's free. There's a UCC and a UU version of that, but it can also be used without any kind of theological information. But if you offer that as a starting point, then at least the parents have some tools to use at home. And it may help parents realize where their own growing edges are and say, oh, well, this was great. So now we can have these conversations. But here are some things that if was serious about enrolling my child in Our Whole Lives and got them there religiously, then you won't have perhaps as many scheduling problems. It's always going to be the case that there's going to be one or two people in your program who you'd love to have participate, but it's just not going to work for scheduling. But don't let that hold you back. Open your doors, as Amy said, or somebody said, open your doors to the community, other faith traditions, form partnerships, and then, as Amy mentioned, you can bundle. You can do 3 or 4 workshops in a weekend, or have for especially for high school. That's a choice that can be made. Don't give up.
Yeah, and I want to say one more plug about the parents and caregivers before we give you all a last word, which is we've had folks come to us and say it was like we had people who didn't know they were parched and all of a sudden they were given living water. So people needing to, or saying like, we started out like, okay, we're going to do 3 of these sessions because it's very flexible. And then people saying, could we just do a couple more? Could we do a couple more? And so people, as we start and open those spaces, as many of you have spoken about, creating spaces for people to have these conversations, to shed their shame, to reunite their bodies and spirits, that is very compelling. Okay, last words, folks. What would you like to leave these people with today about faith and sexuality education?
I threw it in the chat just as everyone was talking and things pop in my mind. As members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we've affirmed shared values within the last few years under our Article 2 to our bylaws, and that is love is at the center of these new values. But remembering from my Christian upbringing, one of the best parts of it was that tiny little phrase, God is love. So if we keep love at the center of everything that we do, you will have God within it, whether you believe in him or her or it or spirit or not. Keeping love at the center of everything that you do fixes or can be the catalyst for change.
Thanks,
At the
Jermaine.
beginning of I'm sorry, Jermaine. At the beginning of the webinar, I think we talked about a little bit about the religion or the faith practices of our youth. And some of those no longer serve us here as adults. And what are the messages that our youth are getting? And hopefully in our faith communities, it's not silence, because silence is not neutral. And so as many of us also hear or experience other people telling the narratives of other folks, when faith communities don't provide honest, compassionate education, other people will fill the gaps and elsewhere. And so grounding in the values and the ethics and the care that OWL gives is a chance to say, you belong here, your questions are welcome, your whole self is loved, and supporting sexuality education is a way that faith communities practice that courage, that love, and that support.
I'd like to add in that what we do ripples out in the world. When I was working at one congregation and responsible for Our Whole Lives there, 30% of the people who came and took our classes did not belong to our congregation. And right now, our voice, this program is the best social justice program I have ever seen in my entire life. And it's needed, absolutely needed right now. We need to be out there countering the narrative that is out there about sexuality education and how important it is to people's lives. So this is truly the social justice ministry that I think I was called to live out in many ways. So, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Well, we are grateful for you, Samaya, and the long history, especially that you and T. Michael have had. You've been involved longer than Amy and I have been. and And, we're so grateful. It was lovely last year to be able to express our gratitude for the decades and decades of field testers and users and contributors and dreamers and visionaries who have created Our Whole Lives as a faith-based sexuality education curriculum, and for the partnership that the UUA and the UCC have. I don't think that this program would be as successful and unique without the partnership. So we're really grateful for that.
Yeah, and I was just going to end with it is the best thing that the UU and the UCC does. And I hope it continues to get funded in a robust and powerful way for this generation and for the next 10 generations, because it is the best thing we do. For denominations that lean into social justice as a primary goal and lean into love as its primary ethic, Our Whole Lives is the center of that ministry. And so we're just profoundly grateful to have been just a small part of that ministry that is saving lives every day.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here today.